They warned the council, "Don't attack Earth." The council did not listen. They thought Earth was a problem to be solved, not a story to be feared. The first voice came from a small envoy on the rim. A diplomat named Kara had seen humans up close. She had seen how they loved, how they fought, how they made small miracles in broken places. Kara told the council that humans were unpredictable. She said they could not be measured by sensors alone. She begged them to leave Earth alone. But the council had rules. The council made choices with lists and maps. They preferred numbers to stories. To them, a single lost scouting ship was a small cost. To Kara, it was a warning that grew teeth. When the scouts arrived, they expected quiet. The ship that hovered over a coastal village wanted data and not danger. Sensors read biomass, settlements, little fires. The scout sent a small drone to observe. An old man on the shore waved a hand. A child threw a stone. The drone fell into the water. This should have been a small thing. The scout did not know stories. It did not know what a thrown stone could mean. When the drone sank, the scout sent a warning. Men and women on distant bridges did not hear warning calls. The council chose power. They sent hunters. Hunters are not like soldiers. They are trophies. They hunt not for survival but for proof. Hunters pick prizes and bring them home. The council gave the hunters orders in calm language: show force, collect specimens, return. When the hunters came, the sky filled with strange ships. They moved like knives. Cities watched purple lights and metal rain. People fled. Some ran to shelters. Others stood and stared. They did not all run because they did not all believe danger could be final. Hope and stubbornness live in human hearts. The hunters found towns that smelled of fish and bread and old wood. They found people who talked in many languages and sang small songs. The hunters took what they wanted. They left marks like carved names on stone. At first, the hunters thought they had measured the world. They thought humans were slow and soft. They did not count the small things. A farmer with a broken plow led a line of children past the ruins of their school. He did not fight with guns. He led with a story. He taught the children how to hide in plain sight. He taught them to listen to air and to read the sound of footsteps. He told them that sometimes the best weapon is a quiet mind. A woman who once painted city walls turned her art into maps. She painted signs that told neighbors where to go when sirens screamed. Her paint also hid traps. Hunters walked into alleys where the air smelled of old bread. They did not expect cables woven into ropes, or nets hung in places where laughter once lived. The hunters were proud. Pride makes hunters predictable. They walked into dances and thought the people would be afraid. Instead, the people sang. When the hunters tried to take a ship, a school teacher threw her body between a child and a blade. The blade cut cloth and skin. The teacher smiled through blood and told the child to run. That image returned to the council as a picture that could not be measured. The council had sent metal and fire, but they had not sent meaning. Across the world, humans who had not even met each other started to talk. A mechanic in a ruined garage spoke to a baker across the sea by voice links. They shared plans. They shared salt. Old enemies traded tools. The hunters could not see this weaving. They saw only broken roads and worn boots. The hunters took a prize that should not have been taken. They captured a small probe and took it to their ship. Inside the probe was a recording of a boy playing in rain. The boy's laugh was bright and loud. The hunter who watched it did not know the sound. His chest tightened. He had hunted many things, but never joy that burned so raw. That change began small. Hunters began to sleep less certain of their trophies. They brought children to their ships and watched them play. A captured hunter once sat by a window and watched a girl tie her hair. He found his hand reaching for the window glass. Something inside him loosened. The council watched reports. Their numbers still said one thing: humans were a variable. Their hearts did not fit neat columns. A small voice in the council that remembered Kara's warning started to speak louder. Now the council had believed the hunters would finish the work quickly. But Earth was not quiet anymore. The first attacks had broken buildings, yes. They had stolen lives, yes. But they had also done something the council did not understand. They had joined humanity together. In every city, people who had never spoken before shared bread. In ruined towns, strangers carried each other across rivers. Firefighters from one country worked beside farmers from another. There was no council above them. There was no single command. There was only survival. And survival was enough to build unity. The hunters began to notice. Their ships scanned abandoned streets, but every time they entered, something went wrong. One fell into a pit made from sewer tunnels. Another was caught by nets woven from old power lines. These were not armies. These were ordinary people using everything they had. Humans made weapons from scraps. They turned broken cars into moving barricades. They learned to hide explosives inside statues and lamps. The hunters soon realized they were not facing prey. They were facing predators who smiled through ash and fire. Still, the hunters were strong. They had armor that humans could not break. They had ships that crossed the sky in silence. They had claws and blades that shone like black suns. Many battles ended in loss for the humans. Entire blocks fell silent, with smoke where laughter once lived. Yet with every loss, humanity changed. Grief turned into fire. Fear turned into strategy. A small boy who had lost his parents built a radio. He taught others how to speak across the ruins. His voice spread like wind, calling survivors together. "We are still here," he said each night. "We are not done." An old soldier, long retired, took children into the forests and showed them how to move without leaving footprints. He taught them patience. He told them that battles are not won by speed, but by waiting for the right moment. The hunters grew frustrated. They were used to prey that scattered. They were not used to prey that fought back with love and fury. One night, a group of hunters landed in a city to claim trophies. They expected easy victory. Instead, they found music. Someone had connected speakers across the ruins. The sound of violins and drums echoed through the dark streets. The hunters walked slowly, confused. That sound was not fear. That sound was defiance. And then the streets lit up with fire. Not fire from weapons the hunters understood, but from torches and burning oil. Humans poured from alleys, shouting, their eyes glowing with something the hunters could not name. The hunters fought, yes. They cut and slashed. But that night they left fewer trophies than they had hoped. The council began to receive strange reports. Hunters who returned alive brought with them something unusual: silence. They did not boast of victories. They did not show off trophies. Some refused to hunt again. One report described a hunter who entered a human home and found drawings taped to a wall. The drawings were made by a child, colorful pictures of stars, animals, and faces. The hunter stood there for hours, frozen. When he returned, he carried no prize. The council grew uneasy. They had thought the hunters would erase Earth. Instead, Earth was changing the hunters. Still, the council pushed harder. They declared humanity a threat to order. They sent more ships. They told the galaxy that Earth would be a lesson in control. But humans had their own lessons. They learned that the hunters moved by rhythm, always in patterns. Soldiers studied these rhythms like musicians study songs. They learned where the pauses came. They learned how to break the beat. They learned that the hunters prized honor. So humans turned honor into traps. They sent false signals of surrender, not out of weakness, but as bait. When hunters approached, Proud and certain, they walked into circles of fire. And most of all, humans learned how to tell stories. They spread tales across the radio waves. Stories of victories, some real, some not. Stories of hunters who fell to farmers, of ships that crashed in rivers, of leaders who never bowed. These stories made the hunters doubt themselves. They wondered which stories were true. They wondered if every shadow held a human waiting. The hunters had never faced prey that fought with stories. On a cold morning, in a valley lined with broken steel, a group of hunters faced a trap so strange it became legend. Humans projected moving images across the sky, old movies, filled with laughter, songs, and battles of their own history. The hunters paused. For the first time, they saw not prey, but people. That pause cost them. The valley erupted with human fire, with traps set in every stone. Few hunters left that place. The council was furious. They called the hunters weak. They called humanity a disease. But deep inside, some in the council remembered the first warning: do not attack Earth. Because Earth was no longer simply a world. It had become a storm. And storms, once woken, do not fade. The council thought the hunters would bend Earth into silence. But Earth did not bend. It broke chains instead. By now, the hunters had lost more than trophies. They had lost certainty. For every human city they burned, another rose in defiance. For every family torn apart, two more stood with weapons made from scrap. Humanity had become something the hunters had never faced before, an enemy that did not fear death, because love burned hotter than fear. And then, humanity changed again. The survivors began to look not only at the hunters, but at the skies beyond. They asked questions: where did these creatures come from? Who sent them? Why? And when those questions took root, a dangerous idea grew: Earth could strike back. A young engineer, once a student of old satellites, gathered others in a hidden workshop beneath the ruins of a city. They pieced together fragments of broken alien tech. They learned the shapes of engines, the rhythm of signals. With every day, they built something new, not just weapons, but wings. Humanity was learning to fly into the hunters' own space. Hunters noticed. They tried to crush these small workshops. They sent raids and patrols. But humans had grown patient. They let the hunters find only shadows, false trails, empty factories filled with smoke and mirrors. One group of survivors became legends. They called themselves the Silent Fires. They struck at night, never speaking, never leaving bodies behind. They would disable hunter ships without killing, then disappear. They studied the hunters' tools, and they left strange marks painted on walls, circles of flame, arrows pointing upward. To the hunters, these marks were curses. To humans, they were hope. The council demanded answers. Why were the hunters failing? Why was Earth still standing? Reports came back half-finished. Some hunters never returned. Others returned broken, with eyes that no longer burned with pride but with doubt. One hunter, a leader of many hunts, stood before the council and said a single line that froze the chamber. Humans do not die the way we understand death. The council tried to silence him. But the words spread. Meanwhile, Earth began to strike back. Small human ships, rough and clumsy, took to the skies. They did not travel far, but they did enough to prove a point. A hunter cruiser was ambushed near the moon. Its engines failed because human saboteurs had learned where to cut. Another was dragged down by explosives tied to old rockets. The galaxy watched as prey became predators. For the first time in centuries, the hunters felt fear. And yet, the strangest victories were not made with weapons. A captured hunter was locked in a basement with nothing but a radio. The humans played music, old songs, voices full of longing and fire. The hunter listened, day after day. When he was freed, he did not fight. He knelt and asked for more music. Another hunter, surrounded in the ruins of a library, stopped fighting when a little girl placed a book in his hands. He had never seen paper, never touched ink. He carried the book back to his people. They read it in silence. For the first time, the hunters saw that humans created not just tools, but worlds of imagination. The council grew desperate. They sent more fleets, larger and stronger. They thought numbers would drown humanity. But numbers could not drown stories. And Earth was now telling the loudest story the galaxy had ever heard. Every victory became a tale. Every loss became a lesson. A mother's sacrifice was whispered in 10,000 camps. A child's bravery spread from mountain to mountain. Even the smallest octoboy who fixed a broken drone, a woman who shared bread with strangers became fire in the dark. Hunters could not escape these stories. They heard them in human voices, in human traps, even in their own dreams. Some hunters began to question the hunt. They began to ask, what if the council was wrong? Earth pushed further. The silent fires launched their first true counter-strike. They boarded a hunter ship in orbit. They fought not with numbers, but with chaos. They cut wires, planted false signals, released prisoners. And when they left, the ship itself turned against its fleet. It fired on its own hunters, blinded by human tricks. The council raged. They declared humanity the most dangerous species alive. But danger was no longer a curse. For humanity, danger was proof of survival. On Earth, people stood taller. They began to dream not just of surviving, but of winning. They no longer wanted to hide. They wanted to make sure no hunter would ever return. And so humanity prepared for the next step. They would no longer wait for hunters to come. They would take the fight to the stars. But deep in the council halls, something else was happening. Some members remembered Kara's first warning. They remembered the words that had been ignored, "Do not attack Earth." Now they whispered a new phrase. The hunters are not the ones unleashing fury. It is Earth. And for the first time, the council began to fear not only for the hunters, but for themselves. Because once humanity learns to hunt, they never stop. The hunters had come to break Earth. Instead, Earth had broken the hunters. But humanity was not finished. They had defended their world, yes. They had turned grief into fire, yes. But now, they looked at the stars. And in the stars, they saw the council, the true hand behind the hunters. The decision came not from a single leader. It came from whispers across camps, across broken cities, across secret tunnels. Survivors spoke the same words: we cannot only defend. We must go out. We must strike back. Humanity had always dreamed of the stars. Even before the hunters came, children drew rockets on paper. Scientists watched the sky with hope. Now those dreams became necessity. In basements and bunkers, humans built ships. They were not sleek or polished. They were patched together from alien wreckage and human steel. They rattled when they flew. They leaked air if you leaned too hard on a wall. But they flew. That was enough. The first launch was chaos. Engines screamed, panels shook, and pilots whispered prayers. But the ship rose. It tore into the night sky, carrying not only weapons, but a message: humanity would no longer wait. The hunters expected resistance on the ground. They did not expect humans in orbit. The first strike was small, a swarm of crude rockets launched from Earth's surface. They hit a hunter cruiser, shattering its wings. The ship burned, falling like a star across the ocean. For days, people cheered as the smoke trailed across the horizon. But humans were not celebrating alone. Across the galaxy, other species were watching. For centuries, the council had used the hunters to enforce order. Every rebellion had ended in silence. Every uprising had been crushed. But now, a small world on the edge of nowhere was fighting back and winning. Whispers spread through distant colonies, if Earth can fight, maybe we can too. The Council tried to silence these whispers. They declared humanity reckless, violent, unstable. But the more they shouted, the more the galaxy listened to Earth instead. The hunters pressed harder. They sent fleets twice the size of the first. Cities trembled as shadows crossed the sky. But humanity had changed the rules. They no longer fought only on Earth. They fought in orbit, in ambushes, in daring raids that seemed impossible. A group of young pilots, barely trained, stole a hunter frigate by tricking its crew with false signals. They painted human colors on its hull and flew it back to Earth. That ship became a symbol. Children touched its metal and whispered, "We belong among the stars." But space was not kind. Many ships never returned. Families waited by radios for voices that never came. Humanity learned the true cost of leaving Earth. Freedom was written in sacrifice. Still, the fight grew. One operation became legend. A squad called the Black Skies infiltrated a hunter warship above Mars. They moved in silence, planting explosives in the core. But when alarms rang, the squad leader chose to stay behind. She smiled at her crew, sealed the door, and whispered into the radio, "Make it home. Tell them we are not prey." The explosion lit the red planet like a second sun. The Black Skies became immortal in stories told by campfires and radios. The Council could no longer hide the truth. Their hunters were bleeding. Their fleets were failing. And worse, some hunters were beginning to turn. It started small. A hunter squad captured humans in the ruins of a station. Instead of killing them, they released them. One hunter even gave the humans water before leaving. The Council demanded answers. The hunters gave none. But deep inside, something was changing. The hunters had always hunted prey without question. But humanity did not act like prey. Humanity laughed even when beaten. They fought even when broken. They carried their dead with honor, not silence. The hunters began to wonder, had the Council lied to us? Meanwhile, Earth prepared for something greater. Engineers spoke of building not just raiders, but fleets. Farmers dreamed of carrying seeds to other worlds. Teachers whispered of schools among the stars. Humanity had been forced into war, but even in war, they dreamed of life. One night, under a fractured sky, a boy pointed upward and asked his mother, "When will we go there?" She held him close and said, "Soon. Very soon." The hunters still came, and the battles still burned. But for the first time, the war was not only about survival. It was about becoming something new. The Council had wanted to erase Earth. Instead, they had awakened it. And humanity, once chained to one small world, was now learning to walk among the stars. The storm was no longer bound to Earth. The storm was spreading. The hunters had expected a broken world. What they found was a forge. And from that forge, the first human fleet was born. It did not look like the fleets of the Council. There were no polished cruisers, no glowing banners, no shining armor. Humanity's fleet was rough, uneven, and loud. Ships rattled when they launched. Engines sputtered. Panels were welded with mismatched metals. Some looked more like flying junkyards than warships. But every ship carried something the hunters did not understand. Every ship carried determination. Every ship carried hope. The Council laughed when they heard the news. A fleet of patched ships, they said, was no more than a swarm of insects. They thought humanity could not leave their cradle. They thought the stars would swallow Earth's children. They were wrong. The first mission was not a great war. It was a raid, small, sharp, and desperate. Human scouts had discovered a hunter supply depot orbiting a barren moon. If the depot fell, the hunters would lose fuel, weapons, and food. If humanity could take it, they would gain something priceless, proof that they could fight far from Earth. The fleet launched at dawn. Families gathered on hills and rooftops, watching the streaks of fire rise into the sky. Children waved flags made of old cloth. Old men whispered prayers. Mothers held babies and pointed upward, saying, "That is where your future begins." The battle was chaos. The hunters had numbers and training. Their ships were sleek and deadly. The humans had courage, tricks, and a refusal to quit. They flew too close, weaving between fire. They fired weapons made from stolen alien tech. They rammed their ships into engines when guns failed. One human captain, his ship burning, aimed at the depot itself. He knew he would not survive. But his voice came over the radio, steady and calm, "For Earth. For all of us." The explosion lit the moon like a sunrise. When the smoke cleared, the depot was gone. Human ships limped home, broken and battered. Half never returned. But the world below cheered so loud the ground shook. The first fleet had won. News spread faster than light. On distant worlds, alien eyes turned toward Earth. For centuries, every rebellion had been crushed by the Council. But now, a new story was rising, the prey had struck the hunter. In shadowed bars and hidden markets, whispers grew. If Earth can fight, maybe we can too. The Council tried to silence the story. They called humans dangerous, unstable, a threat to peace. But the truth had already escaped. The galaxy had seen the fire in humanity's fleet. They had seen ships made of scrap defeat the hunters' steel. And the hunters themselves began to falter. On their ships, hunters argued. Some demanded vengeance. Others whispered doubts. They had fought many species, but none had resisted like this. None had fought with such ferocity, such stubborn love. None had turned grief into strength so quickly. One hunter commander, scarred from battles on Earth, spoke words that echoed across his people. They fight as if every soul carries a star inside. How do you hunt the stars? The Council ignored him. They ordered more fleets, larger and stronger. They wanted to drown Earth in fire. But Earth was no longer alone. Small signals began to arrive, faint at first. Alien voices hesitant, afraid, but curious. Some offered information. Others offered supplies. A few offered soldiers. The galaxy was watching, and some were beginning to choose sides. Humanity welcomed them. Not with trust, not yet, but with open hands. Because humans knew what it meant to be hunted. They knew what it meant to be underestimated. The hunters attacked again. This time, they came with fury. But when their fleets approached Earth, they did not find prey. They found ships waiting in orbit, broken, patched, but ready. They found humans who had learned to fight among the stars. The battle that followed shook the skies. Earth's fleet lost many, but the hunters lost something greater. They lost fearlessness. For the first time, the hunters turned away, retreating into the dark. And on Earth, when the smoke cleared, humanity stood taller. The first fleet had not been perfect. It had not been clean. But it had proved the truth: humanity could fight beyond their cradle. Humanity could carry the storm into the stars. And in council chambers, fear grew. Because they now understood something terrible. Humans were not just defending their world. Humans were learning to expand. And once humanity begins to expand, nothing can stop them. The galaxy had watched Earth burn. Now it watched Earth rise. The first fleet of humanity had struck the hunters hard. They had lost many ships, yes. They had buried many names, yes. But the fire that remained burned too bright to ignore. Across distant stars, whispers grew louder. For centuries, the council had ruled through fear. The hunters had been their fist, their blade, their shadow. Entire worlds had bent under their will. But now, a single planet on the edge of nowhere was fighting back, and winning. Not all who watched were enemies. It began with one hunter. His name was never spoken among humans, but his face was remembered, scarred, silent, and heavy with shame. He had hunted Earth. He had taken trophies. But when he saw the courage of his prey, something inside him cracked. He could no longer believe the Council's lie that humans were chaos, a disease. He saw something else. He saw meaning. So he broke the first rule of his kind. He surrendered. The humans did not kill him. They bound him, questioned him, even feared him. But one small act changed everything. A child, curious and brave, offered him water. The hunter froze, then accepted. That moment was the seed of something new. The hunter gave humans maps of supply lines. He explained their codes, their formations, their weaknesses. For the first time, humanity knew the hunters could bleed. Others followed. Slowly at first, in shadows and whispers. A pilot who faked a crash. A guard who turned his weapon aside. A commander who delayed his fleet just long enough for humans to escape. The Council grew alarmed. Hunters had never turned before. Their loyalty had been carved in blood for centuries. But humans had undone it with something stronger than fear, compassion. And it was not only hunters. Among the Council's many worlds lived species long silenced. They had suffered raids, taxes, and chains. They had watched rebellions fall. They had whispered their anger only in the dark. But now, they saw Earth stand. They saw humans take wounds and still rise. They saw that prey could become predators. The first messages came in fragments. A trader left crates of food on a hidden moon. A medic sent medicine through old radio channels. A soldier smuggled ammunition under cover of storms. Then came something greater. A fleet of small ships appeared near Earth. At first, humans prepared for war. Weapons locked, alarms blared. But the ships did not fire. Their hulls opened, and from within stepped beings the Council had long forgotten. Thin, pale creatures with wide eyes and shaking hands. They spoke through translators with voices like broken glass. "We were hunted too. We are with you." Cheers erupted across Earth. For the first time, humanity was not alone. Together, they planned. Humans taught their allies how to fight with improvisation, with traps, with stories. The allies taught humans about hidden Council weaknesses, old wounds, ancient grudges. Side by side, they became more than survivors. They became a movement. The Council raged. They called humanity a disease spreading across the stars. They demanded loyalty from the hunters. But loyalty cannot be commanded once the heart has changed. In secret, even more hunters began to question. Some stayed in shadows, afraid to act. Others defected openly, carrying scars of guilt. They were not trusted by humans, not yet. But they fought with a fury that proved their choice was real. And as defections grew, something the Council feared most began to spread: hope. On distant colonies, slaves lifted their heads. Farmers whispered around fires. Soldiers hesitated before obeying orders. The galaxy had lived in silence too long. Now it had a voice, and that voice came from Earth. The battles grew fiercer. The Council sent fleets larger than ever before. But when they reached Earth, they no longer faced only humans. They faced humans and their new allies. They faced hunters who had turned their claws against their former masters. The battle above the clouds was chaos. Ships clashed, fire rained, and screams echoed across the void. Many died. But when the smoke cleared, Earth still stood. And the Council had lost something greater than a fleet. They had lost control. In the ruins of a downed hunter ship, a human child painted a symbol, a hand and a star. The hand meant humanity. The star meant freedom. That symbol spread across the galaxy. It was carved into walls, painted on ships, whispered in bunkers. It became a promise: we are not prey. We are the storm. The Council now faced a truth they had never imagined. Earth was no longer alone. The hunted were becoming hunters. And the hunters were beginning to join them. The war was no longer about one world. It was about the galaxy itself. The Council had always believed Earth would fight only to defend itself. They thought humans would hide behind their blue skies and stubborn pride, waiting for the end. They were wrong. The hunters had burned Earth's cities, torn its oceans, and scarred its skies. Humanity had bled, but humanity had learned. And now, with allies at their side, they would not wait for the next attack. They would strike first. The plan was dangerous, reckless, exactly the kind of plan humans were known for. The target, a Council world, not a minor outpost or forgotten colony, but one of their iron strongholds. A world that supplied fleets, weapons, and fear. For centuries, no one had dared attack it. But humans dared. The fleet was small compared to the Council's armadas. Human ships flew patched hulls and mismatched weapons, scavenged from wrecks and reforged in underground forges. Their allies brought what they could: slim craft that moved like shadows, engines that hummed instead of roared. And among them, hidden in the dark, came defected hunters, scarred warriors ready to pay their debt in blood. The Council called them traitors. Humanity called them brothers. The day of the strike began with silence. No speeches, no grand announcements. Just men and women tightening straps, whispering prayers, holding old photographs close. Some kissed charms, others touched scars. Everyone knew the truth: many would not return. But no one turned away. The order came. Engines flared. The fleet slipped into the dark. The Council world rose like a scarred jewel against the void, wrapped in layers of defense. Towers bristled with cannons, shields glowed, fleets patrolled in endless circles. For generations, that sight had broken the will of those who looked upon it. But when humans saw it, they only smiled. One pilot whispered, "Let's see how they like being hunted." The attack came fast, brutal, and unexpected. Human ships darted forward, weaving through fire like predators chasing prey. Their allies followed, striking weak points with precision. The defected hunters went straight for their own kind, ships clashing in battles of rage and redemption. Explosions lit the black sky. Cannons roared. Wrecks fell burning into the planet's atmosphere. The Council screamed commands, but they were too slow. Humans fought differently, with chaos, with instinct, with a refusal to follow the rules of war. They turned debris into weapons, blind spots into ambushes. For every human ship destroyed, 2 Council ships fell. On the ground, teams of soldiers landed. They moved through shadows, striking supply depots, sabotaging factories, freeing prisoners. For the first time, the Council's iron cities shook with the thunder of rebellion. One human squad found cages filled with alien captive slaves taken long ago. When the doors were broken, the prisoners looked up in disbelief. No one had ever freed them before. "Who are you?" one whispered. A soldier answered with a grin, "We're from Earth." The word spread like fire: Earth had come. But victory came at a price. Humans bled. Allies fell. Hunters who had turned against their masters were cut down by their own kin. One by one, ships fell into silence. Yet each loss only fueled the fire. For every friend lost, a dozen enemies fell. The climax came when the humans breached the heart of the defense grid. A single carrier, broken and burning, rammed into the shield generator. The explosion shattered the sky. The defenses collapsed. The Council world, once untouchable, was open. The humans did not destroy it. They could have burned cities, glassed the surface, made an example. Instead, they did something far more dangerous. They walked away. They left the council world alive but scarred, its defenses broken, its fear shattered. And in its ruins, people whispered a new name with reverence and dread. Not the council. Not the hunters. Earth. Across the stars, the message spread. The prey had struck back. The prey had teeth. The prey had become predators. And the galaxy trembled. But while humanity celebrated, the council plotted. They had underestimated Earth once, and it had cost them. They would not make the same mistake again. The hunters were unleashed in greater numbers, armies vast enough to drown entire systems. The war was no longer about punishment. It was about survival. For the council feared something greater than death. They feared the rise of hope. And Earth was no longer fighting alone. The galaxy held its breath. The news of the council world's fall spread like wildfire. For the first time in living memory, a world under council rule had been struck, not by accident, not by rebellion that would soon be crushed, but by humans. The shock waves rippled across the stars. Some cheered in secret. Some prayed. Others trembled. But the council raged. And when the council raged, the galaxy bled. The council called the hunters. Not a fleet. Not a squad. All of them. They gathered every ship, every weapon, every claw. From the dark corners of space, from broken worlds, from long-hidden stations they came. A tide of steel and fire, greater than anything seen in centuries. It was not a strike. It was not a punishment. It was extermination. The order was simple: erase Earth. Erase every trace of its people. Erase its hope before it spread. Human scouts saw the fleet first, their sensors flickering under the weight of so many signatures. At first, they thought it was an error. No one could gather so many ships. But when the truth came, their voices broke. The sky was coming to kill them. On Earth, alarms screamed. Cities that had only just rebuilt prepared to burn again. Children were rushed into shelters. Old veterans strapped on armor one more time. Farmers abandoned fields to carry rifles. Every human knew the truth: this was not another raid. This was the end. But no one ran. The broadcasts went out, to every ally. To every world that remembers what freedom feels like. Earth calls. And for the first time, the call was answered. Ships arrived. Not many, not enough, but they came. Small craft from forgotten colonies. Fighters piloted by defected hunters. Freighters turned into war machines. They came scarred, shaking, terrified. But they came. Above Earth, the fleet formed a ragged line against an ocean of death. Humans stood at the front. Allies took their side. Together, they looked into the darkness where the council fleet approached. One captain whispered across the comms, "If this is our last day, then let it be the day they never forget." And then the sky split open. The council fleet descended, thousands of ships blotting out the stars. The hunters roared their war cries, claws scraping against steel, voices carrying across comm channels. The battle began. The first wave struck like thunder. Missiles, beams, and fire tore through the defenders. Entire human ships vanished in explosions. Shields shattered, metal burned, and screams filled the void. But the humans did not break. They fought with fury, with madness, with the same stubbornness that had carried them through every war on Earth. Their allies followed, weaving through chaos, striking weak points, sacrificing themselves to save others. A single human frigate rammed into a council cruiser, tearing both apart in a blaze of fire. A squadron of defected hunters turned on their brothers, fighting tooth and claw, spilling their own blood to defend Earth. The sky became a storm of death. On the ground, civilians prepared as well. Hidden bunkers became command centers. Farmers turned tractors into barricades. Families gathered with weapons in trembling hands. If the ships broke through, the fight would continue in the streets. There would be no surrender. But for all their courage, Earth bled. One by one, ships fell. One by one, names went silent. The line broke, and the hunters pressed closer. In the chaos, a human commander sent the message across every channel: remember what they fear. They fear that we stand. They fear that we rise. Do not give them silence. Give them fire. The words spread like lightning. Voices rose. Songs of defiance echoed through ships and bunkers alike. Even as death reigned, hope burned. Then came the turning point. A group of defected hunters, led by the scarred warrior who had once hunted Earth, dove straight into the Council flagship. It was suicide. Everyone knew it. But they did not hesitate. Their ship pierced the flagship's shields, tearing a hole wide enough for humans to strike. The humans poured fire into the wound. The flagship shuddered, groaned, and exploded. The hunters screamed in rage. But humanity screamed louder. The Council fleet did not break, but for the first time, it hesitated. The prey they had come to erase was not prey at all. Earth still stood. The battle raged on for hours, neither side yielding. By the time the fires dimmed, the skies above Earth were littered with wreckage. Both fleets were torn and broken. Neither had won. Neither had lost. But for humanity, survival was victory. They had faced the full might of the Council. They had not been erased. They had not been broken. The galaxy had seen it. And now, hope was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. The skies over Earth were still burning when the news spread. The Council had sent its full might, an ocean of ships, a storm meant to drown a single world. They had come to erase Earth, to silence humanity before hope could spread. And yet, Earth still stood. Across the galaxy, the impossible became undeniable. The Council's enemies, long silent, long broken, now whispered a single truth: the hunters can bleed. And when prey learns the predator can bleed, everything changes. On distant colonies, workers rose from mines where they had labored for centuries. They dropped their chains and picked up weapons forged from their own tools. For the first time, overseers fled instead of commanded. On old battlefields, veterans who had buried their hope for decades dug up hidden caches. They brushed the dust from rusted rifles, raised banners long outlawed, and swore oaths whispered only in dreams. Even in the Council's own cities, cracks appeared. Merchants cheated their rulers, smugglers redirected supplies, soldiers hesitated before obeying orders. Fear had been the Council's weapon. But now, fear was slipping from their grasp. The spark came from Earth, but the fire spread everywhere. Messages poured into human channels, fragmented signals, distorted by distance, but clear enough. We rise with you. Our chains are breaking. You are not alone. At first, the humans did not believe it. For so long, they had fought in isolation, convinced no one would come. But the voices kept coming. Dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Entire worlds were calling out. The Council tried to crush these uprisings. They unleashed more hunters, sending them to silence rebellions before they could grow. But something had changed. The hunters no longer faced frightened prey. They faced fighters who had seen Earth survive. Fighters who knew that defiance was not death, it was life. And worse for the Council, not all hunters obeyed. More defections followed. Some came quietly, slipping away in the night. Others came in battle, turning on their brothers in moments of chaos. For every hunter that remained loyal, another began to question. The Council screamed betrayal. But the galaxy saw something else: freedom spreading like wildfire. On Earth, humans watched these messages with awe. Children who had once cowered in shelters now listened to alien voices swearing allegiance to the hand and star symbol. Farmers on distant moons painted it across barns. Rebels carved it into their armor. The galaxy had a flag now. Not the councils. Not the hunters. Earth's. But with hope came a heavier burden. Leaders gathered in hidden bunkers and broken halls. Human generals, alien defectors, even scarred hunters sat together, staring at maps of stars. For the first time in centuries, a true coalition was forming. One human said, "They will not stop. Not until every free voice is silent." An alien replied, "Then we make them silent first." The room grew quiet. The truth was clear. Survival was no longer enough. The war had to be taken to the council itself. And so, plans began. Allies shared secrets of hidden routes and weak fortresses. Hunters who had defected spoke of command chains, of leaders more feared than loved. Every story, every scar became a weapon. The galaxy was shifting. What had begun as Earth's desperate defense was becoming something greater. A rebellion. A movement. A war for freedom. But the council was not blind. They saw the cracks forming. They saw their hunters question. They saw planets whisper rebellion. And for the first time in centuries, the council feared not just Earth, but collapse. In secret chambers, they plotted. If fear could no longer hold the galaxy, then terror would. Plans darker than any before were drawn in silence. The council would not go quietly. Yet across the stars, ordinary voices rose louder. A mother on a distant colony taught her child a new word, human. A soldier painted the hand and star on his armor before battle. A hunter, once feared, now stood in defense of villages that once trembled at his shadow. The galaxy was changing. And Earth was no longer a story told in whispers. It was a banner carried in fire. The war was far from over. The council still commanded armies vast enough to drown worlds. But their greatest weapon, the certainty of fear, was broken. Now, the galaxy knew the truth. If Earth could stand, so could they. The prey was no longer prey. The hunted were becoming the hunters. And the council had awakened something they could never control. The galaxy had been quiet for centuries. Quiet with chains. Quiet with fear. But no longer. The spark that began on Earth had spread into a fire that could not be stopped. Worlds once broken now carried banners of rebellion. Hunters once feared now fought beside those they had hunted. And the council, masters of silence, now faced a galaxy that roared. The time had come. Not for defense. Not for survival. For victory. The target was the council's heart world. A fortress world, shielded by fleets vast enough to blot out stars, defended by towers that had never fallen. It was the throne of tyranny, the symbol of power that had cowed the galaxy for centuries. And now, it was humanity's turn to strike. The coalition fleet gathered. From every corner of space they came, scarred ships patched with scavenged steel, sleek crafts of alien design, massive carriers that bore the symbol of the hand and star. Even defected hunters flew in formation, their jagged vessels now painted with defiance. The humans stood at the center. Their ships were fewer, smaller, but their will bound the armada together. Where once Earth had fought alone, now the galaxy fought at its side. One human captain spoke into the comms, his voice carried across hundreds of ships. They thought we would break. They thought we would bow. Today we show them we rise. A roar of voices answered him, human and alien alike. The battle began with thunder. The council's defenses opened fire, lances of light cutting through the void. Whole squadrons vanished in flames. The coalition pressed forward anyway. For every ship that burned, 3 more surged into the gap. Chaos filled the stars. Hunters clashed with defected hunters, old brothers turned enemies. Alien rebels swarmed defense towers, tearing them apart. Human ships darted through fire, weaving traps, turning the council's size against them. For hours, the fight raged. Neither side yielded. Then came the ground assault. Coalition soldiers stormed the fortress world. They fought through streets paved in fear, tearing down banners that had flown for centuries. Every block was a battlefield. Every corner cost blood. But the people of the world, the ones who had lived under the council's boot, rose too. They armed themselves with whatever they had. Knives, stones, even their bare hands. Side by side with the coalition, they struck their masters down. The tide was turning. At the heart of the capital stood the council chamber. A fortress within a fortress, built to remind all who entered that power could never be challenged. Its walls were steel. Its gates unbroken. But nothing is unbroken forever. Humans led the charge. Not because they were strongest, not because they were fastest, but because they refused to stop. They had carried the war this far, and they would carry it to the end. Explosives tore the gates apart. Soldiers stormed in. And there they found the council. The masters of fear were no longer mighty. They cowered in their chamber, their voices shrill with rage and panic. For centuries they had ruled the galaxy with iron claws. But now, faced with prey that had risen, they saw the truth. They were not gods. They were not eternal. They were just rulers who had mistaken fear for loyalty. And fear had abandoned them. The last stand of the council was short. Some tried to flee. Some begged. Some fought with desperation. But none prevailed. The chamber that had echoed with commands of dominance now echoed with silence. The council was no more. When the fighting ended, the galaxy did not cheer immediately. The cost had been too high. Too many ships burned. Too many voices gone. The ruins of war lay heavy on every heart. But then, from the wreckage of the chamber, a human soldier raised a banner. The hand and the star. The survivors raised their heads. The silence broke. A roar rolled through the city, through the skies, through every comm channel across the stars. The council had fallen. The galaxy was free. On Earth, bells rang. Families wept and embraced. Children who had been born in bunkers saw a future without chains. Across distant worlds, slaves walked into sunlight as free people. Hunters who had once been predators stood beside humans as brothers. And in the great silence that followed, one truth became clear. Earth had been the spark. But humanity was more than a spark. Humanity was fire. The story of humans had begun as prey. It ended as predators, as survivors, as leaders of a galaxy reborn. The council had tried to erase them. Instead, they had awakened them. And the galaxy would never be the same.